Joining me now is someone I've interviewed many, many times over the years, and someone who could not be closer to the Flynn story if she tried. She is the former Deputy National Security Advisor to Donald Trump and the author of the book Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. It's out now. KT McFarland, welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure. Really great to be with you, Andrew.
No, I appreciate your time. I made the assertion in my monologue earlier in the program that to understand how Flynn ended up in this mess targeted by the Obama administration, you'd have to go all the way back to Benghazi. Now, a lot of people might say, Benghazi, what does that have to do with anything? Everything. Flynn thought the Obama administration failed at Benghazi, and he did not go along with the narrative.
That's right. But it's even more than that, because what happened was that when Flynn was director of national intelligence, or the head of the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, he did a couple of things. He reformed and revised a lot of the way intelligence was collected and analyzed because of his battlefield experience in the Iraq and Afghanistan war. Well, that obviously got the swamp creatures really unhappy. They thought it was just terrific the way it was. They didn't want to change. The other thing was that Andrew McCabe, deputy director of the FBI, had been accused of sexual harassment. And General Flynn knew the woman who was accusing him, and he stood by the woman. And so there was a personal animus on the part of Andrew McCabe towards Flynn personally. And then the final thing is that Flynn warned everybody that ISIS, but just by killing bin Laden didn't mean you got rid of ISIS and radical Islamic movements in the Islamic State. And he turned out to be right. So for all those reasons, the animus against Flynn from the Obama administration writ large, and also from individuals, was very deep. They didn't like him. And they knew, Andrew, here was the thing. They knew that when Flynn would be national security advisor to Donald Trump, that he planned a reorganization of the intelligence community. I mean, we had already started making plans to have a thorough review of the Intelligence Committee, all 16 of those sprawling government agencies, with a view towards streamlining them. And so for a lot of the intelligence community and the swamp and the deep state, it was a preemptive strike. They needed to take Flynn out before he had an opportunity to challenge their little breadbaskets.
Let me ask you this. Mike Flynn went on Al Jazeera, of all places, to criticize the Iran nuclear deal, which had to be a huge insult to Barack Obama. But let me ask you this. Was he the person that influenced Trump to pull out of the, or Trump's desire? Did he influence Trump's desire to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal?
You know, one thing I've learned in getting to know Donald Trump before he was president and since, and continuing to stay in good touch with him, is that he makes up his own mind. I mean, you know, Donald Trump, before Flynn was even advising him or supporting him, Donald Trump was extremely critical of the Iran nuclear deal. He was also very critical of the Iraq war and the Afghanistan wars. He was also the guy who first, 20 years ago, Donald Trump started warning about China when China joined the World Trade Organization. So a lot of the things that have now become Trump's policies, you know, America first, make America great again, but particularly standing up to China and trying to get out of the Middle East and refocus America's attention on the Far East, which is where, well, the majority of the trade, the military issues, et cetera, going forward are going to be, was Donald Trump himself. I mean, he's got an amazing instinct for what matters and what doesn't matter, and for getting to the heart of the thing. So I think it was more that Trump was already there on these issues, and General Flynn gave him the credibility and gave him the background to sort of put a lot more meat on the bones, a lot more depth of why the positions that Trump gets to instinctively were the right ones. I mean, that was my role as well, is to come up really with the sort of the more in-depth intellectual approach for why Trump's America First policy made sense and what it consisted of. But Trump himself, he gets there all on his own.
How much of an insult do you think it was to Hillary Clinton to literally have Mike Flynn stand there at the RNC and lead a cheer of lock her up? I mean, he was giving a fiery speech when the crowd started doing it, and then he echoed it. That had to rattle some nerves.
Well, I think it did, and frankly, I'm not in support of what General Flynn did on the campaign trail and the lock her up chants. I just think there are plenty of things to criticize people for. And Hillary Clinton had a mountain of things that she had done wrong throughout her entire career. But I'm not one that believes in brain, because I think it just degrades the conversation. I'd much rather have it be on the substance of it than on name calling. And so, did it get Hillary Clinton mad? Yeah, it got them all mad.
All right, so, okay,
and maybe that was part of it.
Then here's some substance. Almost every single person on that list that was released by Rick Grinnell lied about their knowledge of the unmasking.
Yes.
There's a ton of substance right there.
You bet. And I think there's something a little odd about that, because, I mean, I was in a position to do unmasking myself as well as the Deputy National Security Advisor. And you don't forget. I mean, when they said, well, we don't remember, I don't think I had anything to do with it. Well, the General Flynn, and what General Flynn was doing and what the President-elect Trump was going to do as the president, which was try to improve relations with the Russians and try to prevent the Russians from falling into the lap of the Chinese. It was one of the most important things there was. And the fact that they now claim, well, we don't really remember this unmasking stuff. They're either lying, or maybe they aren't lying. Maybe they're telling the truth. Maybe somebody else put their names down on the list and they were unaware of it. But the whole thing smacks of, especially the Susan Rice email to herself that she wrote, as she was leaving the White House. I mean, within 20 minutes of General Flynn and I arriving in those very same offices. That just smacks of somebody who knew that they were doing something wrong, that they were going to get caught eventually, and wanting to make sure that she was on the record saying that, well, everything was fine, everything was by the books. She would never have written that email to herself unless she and others were aware that what they had done with General Flynn, the surveillance and everything else, was wrong, probably illegal, and certainly without foundation.
I wrote a line at the end of my monologue in a part we call The Argument, and I said that General Michael Flynn was everything that Obama could never be. He was the real deal. Here's a guy that spent 33 years in uniform. We interviewed Representative Lee Zeldin, who served under Flynn as a second lieutenant and speaks the world of him. He refused to bend to the political will. He refused to go along with the whole YouTube video thing at Benghazi. He refused to go along with the cheers of bin Laden is dead and, ISIS is on the run and all that stuff. It's really scary when somebody who can really possess the media the way Obama did take someone like Flynn and turn him into a pariah. I mean, you have a guy that was a community organizer, right? A pro-communist community organizer. He somehow gets lucky and becomes president, and the media buys his line that we're supposed to believe that Flynn is a criminal.
When General Flynn left the White House for the last time, the night he was fired, he said to me as he was walking out the door, he said, I joined the military to fight the Russians. And yet, as you just pointed out, he was portrayed as some kind of soft on communism. He was somebody who was treasonous to America. And here's how it happened. The intelligence community worked very closely with the media, their preferred Washington elite media. And what we could see during the transition and even the first couple of weeks of the administration is it was a concerted effort. There were leaks coming from the media from, quote, anonymous sources. And they would happen every 3 days. So in day one, the Washington Post would have a story about how terrible General Flynn was for, fill in the blanks. And then that would sort of rattle around the echo chamber, CNN, MSNBC, Washington Post, New York Times, more and more articles. And then as it was petering out, there would be a new set of allegations against General Flynn, again, looking like they were coming from the intelligence community. And this was a pattern that repeated itself for several months. And it was a takedown. It was a preemptive strike against General Flynn. But at the end of the day, it wasn't about Flynn or even me, because I had the same treatment from the FBI in the Mueller investigation. We were collateral damage. This was always about getting Donald Trump. This was always about hobbling his administration, sabotaging his administration from within government, working in concert with the media. And yet at the end of the day, there was nothing there. The Russia hoax was a fake. And they knew it was a fake from the very beginning. And yet, what were they willing to do to the American people? Andrew, they put us at each other's throats for almost 3 years while they peddled this hoax. And that, to me, is just one of the biggest crimes against the American people. Because who was winning when they were doing all this? The Chinese. They were sitting back and laughing at us for going at each other. And And why were the deep swamp, the Obama administration, what were they doing? They just could not get over the fact that the American people didn't want him in office.
Last question. As former Deputy National Security Advisor, we've all seen now, also thanks to Rick Grinnell, the fully unredacted email by Susan Rice. I want to circle back to that for just a second. She expresses in there that Comey was concerned with his communications with Sergei Kislyak. Now, this was never a problem when it was Senator Claire McCaskill. We saw that the Chinese had spies in Dianne Feinstein's employ. As a former Deputy National Security Advisor, is it out of bounds or weird or strange or unprecedented for the incoming National Security Advisor to be talking to other foreign leaders?
No, in fact, if you're not talking to other foreign leaders, you're not doing your job. The whole point of a transition is for the new administration to make those connections so that at 12 minutes past noon on January 20th, and you're confronted with a crisis, you're not busy looking through, looking at 411 trying to find out the phone number of the foreign minister of whatever the country is. So Flynn was supposed to be doing that, and they knew it. And that whole thing with it just does not make it doesn't pass the smell test. That entire email chain that she did and the investigations that they were doing that they knew were a fraud, and the whole way it was handled. Here's something to ask your people, right? How did they assume or worry about General Flynn and what he was saying to the Russian ambassador, and was he passing classified information? They knew exactly what he was saying. They had the transcripts of his calls. So the whole thing just is completely disingenuous.
I got to leave it there. KT, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
And congratulations on your ever meteoric rise in your career, Andrew. I'm very proud of you.
We'll have to get you back soon.